It's the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Tune in. Tune in. Tune in. Tune in.
You mentioned early on, ultimately, your goal was to get into building. So talk to us about that transition and just taking it to the level that you always wanted to get it to.
So, I believe that you should analyze and study markets. And when you do that, then you can start to assess the inefficiencies and where the opportunities were. And one of the things I noticed early on, being from the hood, my neighborhood here in Houston is Fifth Ward. That's where I grew up. It's right outside of downtown Houston. And so one of the things I began to notice about communities like mine, like that neighborhood, and not just here in Houston, but all around the country, being in transportation, I was afforded the opportunity to really travel every state in the country except for Alaska as an adult for the most part, and rode Alaska and what was one other state I can't remember. But needless to say, so I did a lot of travel and I cross pollinate that information and those experiences. And one of the things I recognize is that um, from doing loans, I saw how on the lending side, there was a space in our communities that lenders weren't necessarily serving, which meant that if lenders weren't serving it, then builders weren't even building a product for that space. And the builders that did service that space, they gave us a mint like you knew it was affordable housing when you looked at it. No one had to tell you because you could look at it and tell, oh, that's affordable housing. That's subsidized. Like it literally advertised it based on the design aesthetics and just how it looked. And so I felt like, you know what? And at this time, this was before, Rick Ross and Buy Back the Block and that whole mantra, so you're talking about the early 2000s, even before the previous crash. And so, I bought my first lot in my neighborhood I grew up in 2006. I paid $7,000 for it. We bought another lot in 2017 to show you what's happening in that area in 2017. It was 400 square feet smaller than that one, and we paid 45,000 for it. So a 700% increase
Wow.
just on a piece of dirt. But so back when I started buying, I started recognizing that the hood, for in my mind, I just felt like the hood wasn't going to be the hood forever, because in my mind, it's already as bad as it can be. It's already drugs and stuff and deprivation here, so it can't go any lower. It has to go up. And so that was just my premise. And once I started to study finance and business a little bit more, I started to understand from a financial macro perspective how, because it was in a major city, close proximity to downtown, and being in transportation, I understood migration patterns and growth and things of that nature. So I started to get an understanding of how inner city areas were going to be forced to grow as cities began to grow and expand. Because here in Houston, even till today, we still have, depending on whose report, one of the longest commute times in the country. So
Wow.
that means you always have two forces at play in a city like this. There's always a migration of people that don't want to live in a city that going to commute in, and there's always going to be a huge number of people that want to live in the city because they don't want to commute. So all of these converging factors created an opportunity that I was able to recognize in inner city neighborhoods, because again, this was before it was popular to service these areas. Number one. Number two, there weren't a lot of investors there. And number three, you could easily stand out. If you just did just a little bit, it takes just as much to be extraordinary. And so just a little bit here, just a little bit there, putting shutters on your house. So it's basic. Everything is just as basic as everybody else, but we put shutters and we stain them. That one little thing stands out. And so different little things that I could see that we could do represented an opportunity for me to service our market in the building and the development space.
Definitely, definitely. Um, and what was what was that experience like? You mentioned that you purchased a lot in your neighborhood you grew up in. When you bought it, like, did you know exactly what you're gonna do with it, or were you like, you know, let me just buy this lot and
Man,
see what I'm gonna
I knew it was a
do?
good deal. I knew it was a good deal. I could get it for 7 grand. My wife was upset with me. She was mad, but I just knew, sometimes you just have a conviction. And back then I couldn't articulate it, like I can now. I wasn't up on all these different macro trends and this, that, and the third, but I just knew that I knew. And again, this was my neighborhood. So at this time, I'm probably 25 or whatever, some well, it's probably 27 or 28. But this is the area I've been in since second grade. So I remember when it used to be the bloody nickel. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't the bloody nickel no more. It was still the nickel. It was a little blood flowing, but it wasn't the bloody nickel no more. So I had the benefit of history to kind of see where it had come from. And, there was just different things. Again, looking back, I remember, unfortunately, we had a friend that passed when we were teenagers. And so I went to we were at the wake, and in the place, and the wake was in one of the mortuaries in the community. And as we're sitting there, I've always been a reader. So we're sitting in the lobby, and I picked up this big white book because it has some cool pictures. Well, this was one of those books that's put out by, so basically what happened was our community, it wasn't maybe like the civic group, but it wasn't a civic group. It was something like a civic group, got with the city, commissioned a study of what could happen or how would you develop this corridor, one of the main streets in our community. And that's what this book was. So it showed, okay, this is, how you could develop this neighborhood. And if you put properties over here and things of that nature. And so stuff like that happened over time, I never forgot. So coming back to when it was time to buy this lot, I was like, man, this area is gonna blow. So I just had conviction, and I'd seen enough. And so I took a chance. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I just knew it was a good deal. So I said, worst case scenario, I can sell it for profit, or I can actually build on it at some point in time. And so that was my mission. Ultimately, I wanted to build on it, though. That was my ultimate end goal, was to build on it. I ended up selling it instead, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And what was, I guess, I don't know if we've ever had anybody on the show who sold a piece of land before. What was that experience like? How does that work?
Yeah. So, I mean, the cool part about land and as an investing space is there's, most people that are new investors tend to shy away from owning rentals because they, tenants, toilets, and taxes, if you will. And so when you get in the land, you don't have any of that. All you have is taxes, and then, getting the grass cut from time to time. And so it's really like a hurry up and wait scenario. So the beauty in land is, it's very, very low maintenance, and it's really an inflation play. And just like we always say with real estate, if you buy it right, then you can, if you buy it, I always say you can't recover from buying something wrong. But if you buy it right, you can recover from almost anything that will happen. You can have all the worst stuff happen, delays, contractors screw up, all this stuff, and you can still recover if you bought it right. So obviously we bought it right. And what happened is I started to build in another part of town that was more expensive. So I went to a part of town that was further along in the gentrification cycle. And today it's the most gentrified part of Houston. It's a part of Houston called the Heights. So when I was buying my lot in Fifth Ward for 70, lots in the Heights were 50,000 each. So for every one I bought in the Heights, I could have been buying 7 in my community. That's probably one of my single dumbest business mistakes I made, was going to the other folk community and buying versus staying in my community and just buying up a whole bunch of dirt. But needless to say, I was in the other area of town starting to build, and so I needed to offload that lot so that I could have that capital to further that project along. And had another investor friend that was looking, and basic contract, sold it to them, kept trucking.
Are you looking for a community of like-minded individuals and access to experts in real estate?
Yeah.
Are you interested in real estate but need more support and guidance?
You know who it is?
The Black Real Estate Dialogue presents the Real Estate Investing Community. No matter how much or how little real estate experience you have, we've created a community for you because your perspective is important. All right, tell me, where's the #1 place where you can do Q&A with experienced guest speakers 2 times per month? How about unlimited access to past guest speakers' recordings? What about a private Slack channel to engage in daily discussion with everybody in the community to share resources and support each other? Head on over to blackrealestatedialogue.com. That's blackrealestatedialogue.com. It's the real estate investing community presented by the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Come join us today.
So you mentioned like buying land and other transactions. When you think about the next project or the next parcel of land to develop on, like how do you evaluate, all right, we want to build X here, or we want to build X there, or we want to like see what the possibilities are? What's that process like?
Oh man, it's different for every project,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're doing your due diligence. I mean, that's really what you're doing. And whether it's for a residential project or a commercial project, you have a lot of stones to turn over, right? For a commercial project, I'm not going to be able to list all of them,
Mhm.
but I'll probably call out some differences that you wouldn't look at in residential. So one, you got to look at the soils. Are the soils dirty or not, right? Because if the soils are dirty, depending on the type of use that was there before, was there a dry cleaner there? Was there a gas station? Was there a manufacturing facility there? And not just, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, sometimes there'll be uses that have contaminated the soils.
Wow.
And that really impacts your ability to finance a project, right? So we certainly look at soils. And then also it increases your liability because you may be responsible for cleaning the dirt, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of money. We do a very thorough job on researching the title, right? All of the encumbrances, easements, or covenants. I've, we've gotten bit before by a hidden covenant somewhere, deep, deep, deep down in 700 pages of title documents that restricted a potential use on the site, which meant that we could no longer build that use. And we were actually considering building the use on that site. And it was
Wow.
buried down in a ridiculous number of pages. So, that's something that we pay a ton of attention to. We spend a lot of time doing highest and best use evaluations. Like, we are a mixed use developer, so we do residential, we do office, we do hospitality. So we'll have a full on design team, architect, engineer, you have it, traffic, geotech, structural, come in on the front end and actually do massing studies and infrastructure assessments to determine what's its highest and best use. How tall can we build? How many units can we build? How many square feet can we build? How many parking spaces? And then what else did you ask for? What did we look at?
Yeah,
Mm,
I think that was a good summary.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's so much,
Yeah.
like you saw one of my checklist for due diligence on a commercial site. I mean, there's a lot to be done. For example, a due diligence on, a residential project may only a contingency period may be a week. You're gonna do an inspection, an appraisal, and get your financing in order. For us, that contingency period is gonna be 60 days, 90 days.
Wow.
You're gonna have a really long period because there's a lot to be done. I mean, you're really turning over a lot of stones.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. So your checklist, how many pages do you think would you say off the top of your head it might be, depending on like the project?
Pages? Oh, well, the checklist itself might be like on a 11 by 17, right? But in
Got it.
like a spreadsheet, with
Yeah.
maybe 100 different sales. But those sales represent, like, if I'm working with an architect that's going to be, doing a massing study on a particular site, that might be a 2-month process with, 10 different meetings, while we're fine tuning the programming and moving things around. Or, for example, the environmental analysis on the soils, like, that's significant dollars, significant money. So all of those little sales represent huge chunks of time and money. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. How does the company get the capital to deploy for these projects?
It's a really good question. It's different for different companies, right? Different approaches. And there are a lot of companies whose whole business model is based on how they finance the project and the margins in there, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, some people self-finance. I'm not a huge advocate of that because the projects are so big. Not many people have $1 billion to, self-finance a project. But if you have a $5 million, multifamily project that's 50 units, in our market, that would be more like 25 units to build, maybe even a little bit less, depending on where you are. But if you have the money, you could, self-finance. A lot of people like to pull in equity partners. You might find a family that wants to diversify their portfolio or has holdings in real estate, and they're willing to, fund you, or other equity partners that have money. You can go to traditional banks, and you're going to have some skin in the game, a lot more skin than you would in a residential project. There's hard money lenders in commercial real estate. They're going
Wow.
to charge you a significant amount of interest, but they do exist. And then there are also institutions. I mean, large institutions that have significant holdings that just want, a certain return on their investment or a certain cap rate. And they're also willing to come into the deal, usually as debt, not usually as an equity partner.
Got it. And what is the difference between like a debt and equity partner?
So like it's almost like don't think of a partner, right? Just think of equity, right? When you go and you put down however many dollars into a residential project, that represents your equity in the project, right? And then you go and you get a mortgage, which is debt, right? And all that mortgage lender wants is their interest rate return, right? They don't need a piece of your project. They don't care what you make or don't make on the back end. They don't care about any of that. They are a debt provider, right? So in this same case, you might go get, different types of groups, whether that's a family, whether that's an individual, other investor, it doesn't matter, but those folks will become essentially equity partners in that they'll put their own skin in the game, and then you're going to negotiate who gets what splits on the end. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Makes sense.
And a lot of times the way the deals come together is you'll have, a group of equity partners. Maybe it's a single person, maybe it's more. And then you usually take that equity and then you go leverage it to go get debt.
Hi everyone, Sam here from the Black Real Estate Dialogue. Make sure to hit that notification bell and that subscribe button and to visit us at blackrealestatedialogue.com.